In this modern age of ours, we come pretty much accustomed to miracles in the field of science. Miracle drugs for medicine, miracle planes for flight, miracle tools for the defense of our country. Not the least of our modern wonders is microwave radio relay, a system of communication that permits the transmission of speech from coast to coast by air. All this has come about in an amazingly brief period of time. For hardly more than 3/4 of a century ago, there was no such thing as a telephone in all the world. Today in the United States alone, there are more than 40 million telephones. More telephones mean more conversations. And in order to transmit these conversations from place to place, new facilities must be constantly installed and put into operation. Radio relay facilities, for example, like those shown in this scale model display. I'd like to tell you about them. Voices and even pictures are carried by microwaves beamed across the country between towers like these. Imagine more than 100 towers extending all the way from New York to San Francisco, and you'll better understand what a thrilling experience it was to listen in at the dedication ceremonies. Guest speaker in New York was the Honorable Wayne Coy, chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. Said he, "This is truly an historic occasion in the development of American communications." Service over the new transcontinental system was opened by Henry T. Killingsworth, vice president of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, in charge of the Long Lines Department, when he talked with Mark R. Sullivan, president of the Pacific Telephone and Telegraph Company in San Francisco.
I'm particularly happy today, Mark, because I'm talking to you over the new radio relay facilities all the way from New York to the Pacific coast. It's difficult to believe that our voices are jumping through space from tower to tower all the way across the country.
I find it hard to believe, too, Killy. The art of transmitting a man's words certainly has advanced a long way in the 75 short years since the telephone first spoke. Radio relay is another great forward step in our constant search for better ways to transmit speech from place to place, no matter how far apart.
Just a friendly conversation, but the first of millions of conversations destined to ride this new electronic skyway, a skyway designed to provide many hundreds of additional paths for telephone calls. The microwaves that carried the words of Mr. Killingsworth to Mr. Sullivan were transmitted over this newly constructed skyway. Relayed from station to station, they actually made the journey in the twinkling of an eye. But that's too fast to picture, so let's trace their path visually in slow motion. They were beamed from this antenna atop the Long Lines telephone building in New York. A pretty big antenna, this. It weighs about a ton, and its purpose is to focus the microwaves and beam them to a second station, whence they are relayed to a third, and so on and on across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. The path through the sky from tower to tower follows a straight line. The stations, however, are placed in a zigzag manner. This is to prevent interference, which might result if the signal transmitted from one station overshot the mark and was received at an antenna farther along the route. People in Cleveland may have noticed those big horn-shaped affairs on top of the telephone building. They're part of the system. Across Indiana go the towers, dotting high points in the land, tracing a path to Chicago. From Chicago, the microwaves speed westward, across Illinois to Iowa. At Des Moines is the tallest structure of all, 427 feet to the top of the antennas and more than twice the height of the telephone building beside it. Then, almost with the speed of light, the microwaves go west to Omaha and farther west to the mile-high city of Denver. From there, the signal is relayed to a station on the Continental Divide at Creston, Wyoming, 7,000 feet above the sea. Then on and on it goes. In Utah, the towers near Great Salt Lake vary considerably in height to avoid reflections from the salt flats. Perhaps you have motored across Nevada. It's on our route, a route that was once followed by an earlier relay team, the Wells Fargo Pony Express. And so on across the valley of the Sacramento to East Bay Hills near Oakland, California. And thence to San Francisco. This antenna, on top of a Pacific Telephone Company building, receives the radio relay microwaves, after which they're piped to a control room and sent over telephone wires to their destination. What amazing things have happened to speed communication from coast to coast since the days of the gold rush 100 years ago. In 1850, a clipper ship sailing out of New York Harbor and around Cape Horn could hardly reach the Golden Gate in less than 6 months' time. There were shorter ways, to be sure, but even as late as 1860, the swiftest route for a message by train and Pony Express could hardly be negotiated short of 30 days. We all know how the invention of the telephone in 1876 began to speed friendly contacts with one's neighbors. But not until 1892, the year of the Great Columbian Exposition, was Chicago joined to New York by telephone. And as for San Francisco, that was still 2,000 miles away. The first bridging of the continent by telephone, Manhattan to the Golden Gate, was completed in 1915. And so highly was the feat regarded that its accomplishment was marked by numerous celebrations. Since then, 3 other open wire lines, each capable of carrying dozens of calls simultaneously, have spanned the continent by different routes. In addition, 2 cable routes have been constructed, each carrying hundreds of messages. The second of these cable routes is coaxial. It follows a southern course, was completed in 1947. To these routes has now been added this new electronic skyway that reaches from coast to coast. Together, these long-distance facilities constitute a communication system without parallel in all the world. But this newest cross-country telephone route is what concerns us now. Earlier stations were on the order of this concrete tower, which supported the antennas and housed the radio relay equipment. Today, you see many of these concrete towers on the eastern end of the route. Further west, the structures are fabricated out of steel, and the equipment is located in adjacent buildings. Across Nevada and California, where there are many high points of land, the antennas have been placed on the roofs of the buildings which contain the equipment. The 107 stations comprising the transcontinental system represent an investment of $40 million. To erect these towers was a formidable task. Even more so was the task of designing, building, and installing the radio equipment, and making sure that every element in this far-flung communication system was in perfect working order. Here an antenna is being hoisted to the top of a tower. You waited for a quiet day to perform this operation because a heavy windstorm could seriously interfere with the work of placing the horns. Often, too, there was the problem of building access roads to isolated hilltops and conveying tons and tons of equipment. All sorts of vehicles had to be used. Witness this difficult approach to Mount Rose in Nevada. At last, the Skyway was completely established, tested, and found ready for its varied tasks. Thus, with different types of facilities available, open wire, wire and cable, coaxial cable, and radio relay, the nation is assured of continuous communication coast to coast. When the service was opened, Cleo Craig, president of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, said,
"We hope that this latest coast-to-coast backbone facility will never be needed by Americans, except in peaceful pursuits and in helping to strengthen our country's security. At the same time, we are glad this facility has been completed and placed in service ahead of the needs of any great new national emergency."
This newest system Radio Relay has tremendous possibilities. Over any one of its channels, hundreds of telephone calls or a single television program can be transmitted coast to coast. And when fully developed, the system will provide a 12-lane super skyway crowded with voices and pictures.